What's up guys, this is jimmyduraide from the BTS lab. Today I'll be making a video about me reviewing a live play session from one of our BTS CFP student. So he was kind enough to share with me one of his live play sessions that he did at 25 Zoom, and we're going to be reviewing his play in depth for the next hour. So let's get into it. Ace 8 off, we're going to be opening if it gets folded to us. Otherwise, we're just going to be folding. First thing I see is that I think he should have his hotkeys enabled. So just going around and moving his mouse and having to click on the different buttons just loses time overall. So basically, if you have hotkeys and you're using a program like Stars Caption, I think that's the way to go, because I mean you're just going to be putting in more hands per hour in, so that could potentially have an effect on your winnings at the end of the month. And also it's much easier in terms of mental focus, to just not have to like be precise with your clicks and all that type of stuff, and having your mouse to move around like that. Okay, so here we have a pretty easy decision, but I think it's one of the first interesting spots in the video. We're going to be talking about the pocket fours after. But here, he ended up calling, which I think is definitely not the right way to approach these. I mean, he wasn't sure, so you see that he was thinking about it. But here, you have somebody that ISOs a recreational to almost 4 bigs out of position. I mean, here I'm fine with doing some calling. I think we can have a calling range, like something like pocket pairs, some suited stuff. But this hand plays super bad multi-way. I mean, it plays really bad in general, but especially multi-way, especially that he's gonna have, like, it's not like he's gonna be ISOing this guy with a 50% range. So when he opens, let's say, small blind versus big blind in a single raise spot, and he opens like 45 to 50%, I mean, this hand is never fold, so it's either going to be a 3-bet or a call. But once he's ISOs this guy, I mean, like, multi-way, the offsuit, disconnected, like, type of hand like this just plays really, really bad, and we want to stay away from that. Even hands like Ace 5 off, Ace 6 off, like, we just want to be folding those. So we prefer having some suited stuff, pocket pairs, some better hands like Ace Jack off, you know, that we could call, and then try to keep the recreational in, but also a hand like Ace Jack off. I'm mostly going to be 3-betting here. It just doesn't play that well out of position 3-way. So basically here we're gonna have a calling range, but like this hand is definitely not in it, and I would still call like smaller pocket pairs, like some suited connectors, some suited broadways type of stuff. But this hand just doesn't cut it. And then here, villain opened to 2.4. Just 1 second. Yeah, so he opened to 2.4, and this is never gonna be a 3-bet, like a very, very low frequency, maybe like 0 to 5%. Also, he makes it smaller, so he doesn't make it 3x. That means that we just have to defend much wider, and we're just gonna be 3-betting less. So basically, let's say we 3-bet, I don't know, for example, like 19%. Versus a like 45, 46% open race frequency with a 3x sizing. But against this sizing, we're just gonna 3-bet less. So I'm not sure exactly how much less, probably something like 15, 16%, I would say. But we just have to defend much wider. Also, we're getting a better price on the call, so we're just gonna be defending wider, 3-betting less in terms of frequency, and yeah, we're mostly gonna call. So hands that, you know, like, would mostly be 3-betting, like, we can start calling those, and we're just gonna have to defend much wider. So hands like King 4 off, for example, that we would always fold versus a 3x, then we can start calling against the smaller size, and then we have to adjust our range. But so pocket fours, I mean, it's just going to be a call here. We're not really going to do anything other than call. And versus the big bet size, I think bet size is okay on these really connected. So if the board was like 10-9 deuce where it's connected, but the third card is a blank, I think that's where you can actually use the really big size, or not really big, but the big sizing in terms of like 3/4, like 2/3 to 3/4 spot when the board is quite draw heavy. I mean, the board is still okay for you. I mean, you have all the strong hands and all that, but the board will change quite a lot on different turns. So like any spade, any 10, any queen, you know, that's quite a lot of hands that, quite a lot of cards that will potentially shift the equities. So being out of position and putting in a lot of money into the pot right now when the board will be changing quite a bit on future streets, it's not really like the best idea. So if you want to be putting in money, I mean, the board needs to be like, as a general rule of thumb, the board needs to be not great but not terrible. So basically, like on, let's say 9-8 deuce board, it's not great, but again, when you have a hand like pocket tens, pocket jacks, a good 9x, good top pair hand, I mean, there's fewer turn cards that you will not like. So putting in a bit more money into the pot makes sense. But when the board gets really connected like this, I mean, we just use a polarized range, and I would just split my range with a 1/3 size. And then on like the jack 9 deuce, then I would be absolutely fine to be using a sizing like this. But I don't think it's a big mistake. But against this sizing, we're just gonna have to fold here. Pretty standard stuff. Against a 1/3, it's closer with the spade, but again, I still think we can fold. So pretty easy fold with king 8. We should have folded pre-flop. King 7 off, I mean, pretty close. Like king 8 would be, like I would pretty much always open. King 7 is kind of like on the borderline. I tend to try to be a bit more aggressive from late position if I were to play in the micro stakes, as people are not defending enough. Also, they're not 3-betting enough, that type of stuff. So just being a bit wider in general, I think is totally fine. So, I mean, king 7 is right on the borderline type of hand. If we have a bit more read, we can start opening wider. Yeah, pocket 7s, we're not going to be folding. So here, 9-10 suited, I haven't checked, let me just check the 7s, what happened. So he opens 3x, I think this is a fine fold. I mean, at higher stakes where the rake is lower, we can have a calling range on the button, but like at 25 zoom, the rake is much higher. Also, he makes it 3x, so we get a really bad price on the call. It would be a bit too loose to be 3-betting, so just folding is totally fine. Now with 9-10 suited, I think we can do both options in the sense that I still think ISOing is fine. I wouldn't ISO like super wide and super light just because he's like 26 big, but I would start ISOing with a range that can flop decent top pair candidates. So like hands like queen 10 off, king 10 off, like ace 10 off type of stuff where we flop top pair. The hands like ace 5 suited, I would not really ISO just because now, like if we flop a 5, it's not great. But if we have a hand like queen jack off and we flop a jack or we flop a queen, we just go with it, and our hand is pretty easy to play. If he was a bit deeper than the ISOing range, we could start ISOing a bit wider, that type of stuff. I think this hand is fine as the 9 and the 10 is still a fairly high cards. If I had like 7-6 suited, 7-8, 5-4, like it's just stuff that I would just complete. Like smaller pocket pairs, same thing. I would probably ISO like 7s plus or something like that. I think that's fine. So E calls and then the E calls. So I mean, we're just going to be a bit more cautious here. Pretty interesting spot. I would be checking. Like if we get jammed on, it's really like not great. Like he could even be jamming stuff like ace 10, king 10 that just have us like dominated, which is not great. Plus they can both have jack X, they can both have queen X. Just checking in general, I think is fine. Now we bink it. So now I think like just betting. Just bet. I would bet something like, I would not go for the jam. I mean, we have a super strong hand. I would just bet something like 13 and give him the potential to actually jam himself. Even though he has a pot size bet left, I think that's fine. We're going to be folding with the 3-bet with 7-6. Pretty easy call. And he has king 10. I mean, this is what I'm saying, right? Like by betting, if he actually raised like on the flop, it's like really not great because like even his draws dominate us. So just trying to be playing a bit more passively just to try to realize our equity, I think is fine. And then like we can be betting the stronger like draws like this, like king 10 or ace 10, right? Where we dominate some of his potential draws that he can have as well. And he sucks out, which is okay. Happens. Pretty standard open with king queen off. Let's see what happens here. So there's a limp under the gun. Yeah, so I would ISO to like 5.5 bigs. 6 is fine as well. All right, so I mean, the board is pretty connected in the sense that like there's a lot of stuff that has a gut shot here. If the board is like king 8x, it's much different. But like all of his queen jack, jack 10, 8-7, 7-6 all have a gut shot. So does betting small here really accomplishes quite a lot? Not really, because I mean we don't put any of his hands into a tough spot. So it's going to be a spot where I'm going to be betting a bit more polarized with a bigger size. Just because I mean he's going to have 5x, he's going to have 9x, he's going to have king x, he's going to have hands like jack 10, queen jack. So just having a very high the c-bet frequency just doesn't work well with a small size here. So I would be using a more polarized strategy. And this hand, I mean, if we start betting this hand, we don't have a spade. We have, I mean, backdoor like diamonds blocker, which is fine, but we block king queen, which is okay as well. And plus we have some showdown value. Also, like those type of guys are not the type of guys to just start barreling like crazy, hands like 6-7 type of stuff. So we're going to be getting to showdown a bit more often than we should. We have showdown value, poor barrel ability on different type of turns. So all these, concerning all these factors, this makes this hand a check. When you have less showdown value, better backdoor barreling equity, if you want to put it this way, it just makes it like a better candidate to be barreling. So like if I have a hand like ace 8 of diamond, then even though like, I mean, we still have ace high, but we have like backdoor straight draw, backdoor nut flush draw. Those are the type of hands we're going to be betting. But this hand, we have showdown value, poor backdoor barreling ability. So we're just going to be checking it. Yeah, so I don't think like having a small c-bet strategy here will work pretty well. I would rather use a polarized strategy here with a like something like a 2/3 to 3/4 bet size. But he folds, so fine. All right. So we see that the student uses a RNG. I would mostly use the RNG if you were to use the RNG pre-flop. Again, like I would mostly tend to say that there's always going to be there's always going to be a better approach than just strictly using the RNG, in the sense that like you have to factor in the type of player, you have to factor in like the type of ranges that you're facing and all that type of stuff. So here with a hand like pocket tens, I saw that he clipped it. The thing is that like here, even though like it should be like maybe like a very few percentage of the time getting 4-bet this hand, I mean like at these stakes, like I just don't want to be 4-betting here. Like, so it's mostly going to be a pure call in this position. We can start 4-betting sometimes against the more aggressive regulars, like if we are button versus small blind. But again, like I would just stick to try to be a bit more like play a bit more exploitatively when playing micros and all that, and not really bother about like really mixing like those type of hands, except like if you want to be mixing like blind versus blind because you 3-bet like 19% or something like that, you know. But those like very few, like let's say like you should be 4-betting like 10% or 15% of the time, I would just use those as a pure call. And then hands like, let's say you are blind versus blind and small blind opens and you have a hand like jack 9 off that you want to be 3-betting around like 50% of the time, then I mean it's fine using the RNG for those type of stuff. But those like very few like I want to be like 4-betting this like 20% of 10%, I would just not do it and just stick with like a pure call strategy or pure whatever else is. So yeah, I mean against this it's a super clear fold. I mean, I would probably here, just 1 second. Did he call or did he 4-bet? Okay, so he called 4-bet. So yeah, I mean, it's a pretty easy fold. Like I would probably stick it in with ace king and then queens plus here. Jacks is put in a very tough spot. I think easy, like tens is pretty easy fold. Jacks, I also think it's a pretty easy fold. I think like I would just get it in with something like queens plus, and then we can adjust as well if this guy is really tight. So like if he's really tight, then we can start adjusting. Also, if we are, let's say, under the gun, right? So we are under the gun, we get 3-bet by small blind, and then this guy called 4-bets. I think it's totally fine to start folding hands like ace king because people will just be way under bluffing in these positions, and it's like very likely that he's just going to be like cold 4-betting something like kings plus, or like even queens in his shoes is not that great. But again, like we kind of have to adjust. Like in these positions, I would not fold ace king, not fold queens. But let's say I'm in under the gun and this happens, then it like ace king and queens are much more in a tougher spots, if you want to put it this way. Pocket sixes against an open 3x, we're just going to be folding. 3-betting would be too light here. King 9 off, we're going to open. If it's folded to us, then 5 suited is a fold. So we see a lot of people opening 3x. That just means that we're going to be doing less calling from the big blind, a bit more 3-betting because they're putting in more money into the pot. So it's less attractive to call because the price is worse, but it becomes more attractive to 3-bet. So we're going to be 3-betting, like we're going to be folding more as well, but we're just going to be 3-betting a bit more. So like those hands that, let's say you are in the big blind and button opens 3x, those hands that you would mix in sometimes as a full, like as a call and 3-bet, for example, a hand like king jack off, for example, like you could, or king queen off, you would 3-bet or call sometimes. Then like if he opens 3x, I would just stick with only 3-betting and not really calling anymore. That type of combo. For example, if you have a hand like king 5 suited, that is mostly always going to be a call, then I would just stick with calling. But those hands that you mix, for example, like king queen off that I just said, or ace jack off, you know, that you could call pre, or you could 3-bet, then I would just tend to stick with a 3-betting strategy. Sixes we're always going to call. Not sure why he min raises, probably because of the short stack there. To his left. The thing is that like I would not really decrease my sizing. I would just like tighten up a bit. So like I would not really, especially if he's like really loose. So like if he's playing like 40-12 or something, you're gonna get cold call quite a lot. So you don't want to be opening too wide. So hands like deuces through 5 we can just fold, and then sixes I would mostly always open. As far as this board, like if I were button big blind, I would see bet range for 1/3. Since it's tighter range, so it's tight range versus tight range, I would still see bet my entire range, but I would size up to a half pot size here. I think going 1/3 is okay, but again, like in general, like the general concepts that we see is that like when it's tight range versus tight range, the sizing usually tends to go up. So button versus big blind, he's gonna have way more hands like 7-4 suited, like jack 5 suited, like queen 4 suited. Those are the type of hands that he could start potentially or should potentially fold pre-flop versus the under the gun range. So betting small really accomplishes a lot when you're on the button, because you put all those hands into a tougher spot, where when it's tight range versus tight range, he doesn't have like those like 8-4 suited type of hand anymore, those 10-5 suited type of hand. So just going with a slightly bigger size, I think is totally fine. I don't think it changes that much, but it's just a general concept that when you are like in tight range versus tight range situations, you kind of want to size up, whether it's like SRP or in 3-bet pot as well. So I would just stick with a half pot, I think is fine. And then, yeah, I mean, here with the ace-9, I would 3-bet to 3x. I think it's fine. And then against the check raise, I mean, we're just going to be folding. We could call with a diamond. So at least with a diamond, we get some we get some equity on diamond turns. And also if we hit a 6, it's almost always going to be good, in the sense that if he doesn't have 4 or 5. But here, even if we hit like a set, I mean, like one of the two outs out there like brings the flush, so it's not great. So like when we do want to be calling, we mostly want to be having a diamond in our hand, and also like he's gonna be check raising a bit stronger range. Also it's big blind versus under the gun, so just overfolding a bit is totally fine here. But this hand I think is a fold. I think like here, yeah, so here, I mean, we could either bet or check. I think both are totally fine. I mean, he can still have 9x for sure. He can still have like plenty of other stuff. He can have some give ups as well. So I think betting is going to be working fine, as we get I cannot have like 9x of diamond, for example. So just betting small to protect against like overcards, or protect against hands like ace 5 that he check raised checked, or some flush draws, I think is going to be working pretty well here. And we're going to be talking about the other spot as well afterwards. And now he's not really sure. I think just checking back, realizing like, what are you hoping to get called here when betting? I think it works much better betting the turn to get protection here, and then checking back the river, than just here. I think we just get to check. We're specifically targeting hands like 4s and 5s, or something like ace 3. We're not even sure he's gonna call ace high. I think this guy is like the micro stakes legend or something like that. But yeah, I mean, I just think like checking back, getting to showdown is totally fine. Then 5-7, I think it's a pretty decent candidate here. You should probably be betting there. I mean, you cannot really have a worse hand than that. The thing is that exploitatively, maybe he doesn't even expect you to be folding ace high or something like that. So just under bluffing is okay. But yeah, I think his check raise on the flop is totally fine. He has great backdoors, and then just giving up with this specific combo on the turn is totally fine as well. And then river, I think it's kind of whatever. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to get there with a worse hand, because if he has a hand like 4-5, he's pretty much always going to be betting the turn, right? So like, it's really like this hand that's like really the bottom of his range, so he should probably just be betting there. Now let's get back to this hand, which I think was super interesting. Yeah, so there's a limper here. We have king jack off. I think the mistake here is when he actually like ISO this big. Like I would probably ISO like something like 3.5, and we could potentially have a raise folding range. But once we actually like ISO 5x here, I mean, and then he raises, I like, we can never fold here, I don't think. He's gonna have like low pocket pair. He's gonna have hands like we saw, like ace queen, ace 10 suited. Yes, sometimes he's gonna have like aces or ace king or whatever, but he's just gonna have a lot of like pocket pairs, like stuff that we have decent amount of equity against. So yeah, I mean, now we're just getting it in. And also, like, this is like coming back to this hand, so like it just made me realize also that like the bet on the turn is very important, in the sense that like when we bet the turn here, we kind of protect our hand, right, against his like ace high or overcard type of stuff, or flush draws that he can have, right? The problem is like we could check here. I think checking is also fine sometimes, but when villain is actually never bluffing the river here, especially like he has like one of the worst hands in his range and he's not bluffing, then checking back like the turn is not great, because now we never, like, we just basically let him realize all of his equity. He's never going to be bluffing the river, so we don't, like, it's just not great overall. So just betting small on the turn, especially the fact that we saw that he's not even willing to bluff like one of his worst hands in his range on the river, I think is just going to perform much better than checking turn. So yeah, so let's see what happens here. Then we don't get there. It's fine. Yeah, it happens. Ace 9 we're going to be opening. Against a 3-bet, we're just going to be folding. it's not really a part of our four betting range there. Where we can start four betting hand, like the ace ten off type of hand. Yeah, I mean, like pocket nines here is not great. I mean, against a 3x, I mean it's not great. I mean, it's not like seeing a 3x is never amazing, right? The thing is that like it's too weak to 3-bet. I mean, it's really too strong to fold, so we're only going to be calling here. King 10 off against a 2.2, I think we can call. Against a 2.5, it gets close. But like I don't think folding is a huge mistake. I would start folding like worse hands like Jack 10 off before that. Pocket nines against a bet like, yeah, I mean he just RNG'd like a raise. Not a big fan of that. Like I mean our hand, like we could do that with worse pocket pairs, you know, if we want to be using like usually like those in this situation it raises the best pocket pairs and then the worst ones, but like I would prefer like raising a hand like pocket deuces, pocket threes, for example, where like there's many more like overcards possible. Nines, I mean, it's quite a strong hand and we're kind of turning it into a bluff. The board is really dry here, so yeah, I would have probably just called there. Six eight suited, we're going to be folding. King 7 off again, it's like right on the border. Yeah, I mean, we had this exact same situation before. Yeah, once we have a bit more read, we can start to be opening a bit wider. I don't think it's a huge mistake. It's not like we're opening like Queen 4 off or something, but yeah, I mean, it's still pretty wide. A7, we're going to be folding. So yeah, I mean, like when we are actually raising against a limp, the thing is that like here, like he limps, like it's not like he's gonna have like a balance range or anything, you know. It's not like, oh, I'm gonna create a limping strategy and I'm gonna be limping some strong hands and then also some bad hands, right? And then the middling part of my range that wants to raise, I'm gonna be having also a raising strategy. I mean, it's not that, like, for sure. Otherwise, it would not be playing 25 NL because that's a much more complicated strategy. So when he limps, I mean, his range is actually quite bad. So we can do a bunch of raising, and I also like raising like some really bad hands. So we're going to be a bit more polarized when raising here. I mean, of course, we're going to raise like the good stuff, but also we can start raising hands like 8-4 off type of stuff, like those really bad hand that we can just check back. Just raising them at some frequency, not all the time, I think is totally fine. So King 8, I would just like, it's like right in the middle, right? Like it's not great, it's not bad. So like I would tend to just check that back. I mean, we could raise sometimes, but when I raise, I would have like I would like to have like a much worse hand to be raising there. But I still think like raising at some frequency is fine. So against a min open here, what I would be doing, first of all, I would not have a calling range, but like he's 28 bigs, so I would just be 3-bet getting it in here. And then he clicked on the RNG. I mean, I think calling is not, like, I mean, this is really not the best option. I mean, like, even if you hit a set, right? Like, you're gonna get 26 bigs, which is definitely not not the best idea. I mean, if he was 100 bigs, he min open, he's a recreational, I think calling is fine, but I would still prefer 3-betting just to get the pot heads up versus the guy. And also, like, they don't 4-bet enough. It's not like he's going to be balanced, so we're just going to have like to fold a bit, fold quite a lot versus the 4-bet, because it's just not going to happen. So just like if he's 100, like I would just be 3-betting, and here I would just be 3-betting, trying to get it in. He's gonna have hand like ace jack, ace 10, even worse pocket pair sometimes. Hands like king queen. Yeah, I'd probably be calling one against the 1/3 here. Still not great, but again, like we should be folding pre-flop. I mean, we should not be calling. Like just 3-bet, getting it in, I think is the right approach here. Now it kind of sucks. Here, exploitatively, what I would do is I would just bet really, really small, like something like 2.75 big blinds, something like that, to just like target his overcard type of stuff. Because I would rather just bet small, create my own price, than just check back and then he bets like 6 or 7 bigs or bigger than that. And also, if we bet here and he check raises, I think he's always going to be very, very face up. So it's not like we're going to be put in such a growth spot and we're going to have like 2 cycle. I think once he check jams, he's pretty much always going to have it. So just betting small here, looking to check back the river. And then here, I mean, it's, yeah. Then he checks again. I mean, just checking back is fine. Also, by betting small, we get some value from ace king, ace queen, ace jack, or whatever he has. Or deuces. I mean, this is one of the hands that, you know, like I could definitely see getting it in pre-flop versus the 3-bet at like 26 bigs. King 9 off, we're going to be opening. Pretty easy fold versus a 3-bet. Even has like king 10 off, we fold. King jack off, we can start mixing in calls and 4-bets. Yeah, so like 5s is not going to be like a pure 3-bet. So we're going to be mixing. Again, like I would need a bit more reads. Once I have more read that, let's say he opens wider, that type of stuff, we can start 3-betting a bit more. But again, like I would just stick with a pretty solid strategy when I don't have that much information. I think his sizing is just on the bigger side. Maybe going something like 10.5 is fine. Maybe going slightly bigger from the big blind makes a bit more sense. So going like 11.5 from the big blind and then 10.5 from the small blind, that's what I would be doing. So this is an interesting situation where it's a spot where we could actually have like a few different sizes. We could have couple different strategies where we could have it's a spot. So like this is a situation where we have to be betting a lot. So that's the most important point, right? Like we have to be betting a lot. Like it's a high frequency c-bet spot, but we could use more than one sizing in the sense that like it's mostly going to use like a quarter pot or a small size, and then it would also use something like a 3/4 to a pot size bet, because there are some hands that really wants to benefit. I don't think it's going to be using like a pot size here, just because of the king X top pair with flush draw is out there. It's kind of the same thing when the ace-high flush draw is out there. It's not going huge. So I could see it going something like 3/4 spot and also like a 25% pot, and betting like 85 to 90% of the time. So I think a couple different strategies make sense. So like just going like a quarter pot full range, I think is fine. Going like a quarter pot and adding like a 75% with a range that fits the sizings pretty well, I also think is fine. But I would only suggest to start doing that maybe using like more than one size once you start being more comfortable with your strategy, once you start to be a bit better as a player. Because my suggestion is really to stick with one size in most cases. I know that I know really good players that are playing like 5K and up, and they're just mostly using one sizes like on flops and turns, and then splitting their range on the river. So I think that's also a really good strategy. I was just mentioning that like on these type of board, like King 10 Deuce, where it's like pretty good for us, but still a bit connected, that you could see some bigger bets as well as some smaller bet. But the overall idea is that we have to be betting this aggressively. So going a quarter pot, I think full range, I think is totally fine here. Or 1/3 full range, I think is fine. Now, I mean, like fives is really like the bottom of our range in terms of pocket pair. I think that here, I mean, you can have eights, you can have King 8 suited, 10 eights suited as well. We're gonna have plenty of bluffs here, hands like Jack 9, 9-7 if we actually 3-bet that. Queen Jack suited, we're gonna have diamonds. We can have hands like 6-7 as well that has a gut shot on the turn that we 3-bet sometimes. I think this hand, like I think the other ones like 6s, 7s, 9s, I mean they're always going to be checking. Since it's like really like the bottom of our range here, I think that we could potentially start turning this into a bluff, but we do have some quite a few bluffs here. But I wouldn't be surprised if this hand is actually getting turned into a bluff some frequency. But again, like he's going to be also overfolding on the flop versus the c-bet. So like those really like close bluffs, I think just giving them up is fine as well, just because his range is going to be on the tighter side. Not very tight, but like he's just going to be like folding a bit more than what the solver would. So just under bluffing slightly, I think is also fine on the turn. So let's see what he does. If we were to bet, we're going to be using a bigger size, something like 2/3 pot. Let's review this hand after this session. I think it's a pretty interesting hand. And then he bet small, I think is bet size. The thing is that like it's not like he's gonna. The problem with his bet size is that he's not betting 8x. He's not betting 9s. Is he betting 10x? I don't know. Maybe a hand like ace 10, right? But it's not a spot where you can go super thin for value, right? So his range is going to be more polarized when he's going to be betting here. He's going to be saying, okay, I have king queen plus, right? And or a bluff, so I want to be betting on the bigger side. So something like, I don't know, like 26, 27 bigs. If the board is like 10 deuce 4 turn deuce, then we're gonna have a bunch of overcards in our range, like hands like ace king, ace queen, king queen, like some offsuit broadways that just gives up, right? So betting with a smaller size, with a more depolarized range, I think makes a lot of sense, because we put all of those hands into a tough spot, right? As if we bet big, then like ace king, ace queen off would just fold. But here it's like we have a bunch of middle strength hand, like 10x, like jacks, queens, like king 9 suited type of stuff, right? That we check the turn with. So that bet size doesn't accomplish that much. So like it's either he wants to bet bigger, right, with a polarized range to put like our jacks into a tough spot, or like 10-9 into a tough spot. But this, I mean, we just get to have a pretty easy call on the turn with those hands. And with this particular hand, we're just going to be folding. So yeah, so let's just wrap things up. I'm gonna be running this sim, and we're gonna be taking a look into it and just wrapping up this video. I think there was some very interesting spots throughout like the 12 minutes that we looked at. So I'll be right back, guys. What's up, guys? I'm back. So I ran this sim, and let's take a look into it quickly. As for the inputs, I inputted about a 15.5% 3-betting range, so about a quarter of the suited connectors, not all, like a mix of like the worst ace-x suited, and then like pocket pairs, about half of fives, and then some the offsuit broadways sometimes as well. And I think it's a pretty fairly standard size range. Then as far as his calling range is going to be mostly pocket pairs, suited connectors, suited gappers. I mean, mostly like the stronger ace-x suited, and then a mix of like some ace-6, ace-deuce type of stuff. And then as well as the offsuit. So like hands like ace-jack, ace-queen, and king-queen are mostly going to be called or 4-bet, so it's not like we're going to be folding ace queen off versus a 3-bet, but we're either going to be calling or 4-betting. And then as far as the inputs, I inputted 4 sizes on the flop, and to see what type of sizing it actually prefers. And it was about how I talked about it in the video, where it's a spot, first of all, that we kind of check not much, right? So we betting at a very high frequency, and it's using like pretty clearly 2 sizings, so like the small ones and then a big one, and then the big one is mostly something like ace queen plus, king queen plus, right? And then yeah, I mean, the thing is that like if you would like to put your strategy more complicated, I think like we could start playing on the flop. But again, like I would stick with like a quarter pot full range strategy. I think it's totally fine. So what I did is that I reran the sim with only a quarter pot here. So again, we see that it's exactly the same sim, but with a quarter pot full range strategy. So once we bet a quarter pot, I mean, he needs to call like pocket pairs with a diamond. And then he needs to call like something like ace-5 backdoor flush draw, ace-4 backdoor flush draw, ace-3 backdoor flush draw, which I think like some people might be folding those. And then yeah, I mean the rest is pretty standard. So once he calls and then the turn is an 8, we see that it's using quite a bit of both sizing, so the block and then the medium. I would stick personally with one size here and bet a more polarized range on the turn. So bet something like 2/3 pot and bet something like king jack plus, something like that. And then some bluffs. And then as we can see, the hand at pocket fives, it's one of our worst pocket pairs, and it's actually betting that at a pretty high frequency. So I was like those hands like sevens. So it's usually like the worst ones we can start turning into a bluff. So just think about like, how wide am I 3-betting here? What's my worst pocket pair? So like turning these hands into a bluff sometimes, I think it's totally fine. So we see that like I was right with my assumption that it would be betting this combo pretty aggressively, and then hands like 6s, 7s, 9s were just never going to be betting. Yeah, so I mean, so I guess like again, other than that, we're mostly going to be like, we're betting this at pretty aggressively. I would just stick with like a 2/3 sizing, bet something like king jack plus. We could mix in with king jack, and then yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. And then once we check, again, like this is like I mentioned previously, like there's really no blocking going on. I only put like 60%, but like again, like it could even go with like 70%. So I mean, the main idea is that there's pretty much no hands that wants to be betting small. So when he's betting, he's basically saying, okay, when we're checking, like we're gonna have like more jacks, right? Because I mean, we're gonna have like 10x We're gonna have hands like nines or like ace eight type of stuff. So we're gonna have a bunch of medium strength hands. So when he's betting, he wants to say, okay, I know you have all those hands, but I have those beat. So betting with a bigger size and not a block size, I think makes a lot more sense. So yeah, and then once he bets this, I mean fives, I mean it's still calling against like the bigger size, but again, like I think that people are going to be under bluffing there, so just like folding like the really bottom part of our range, I think is totally fine. So hope you guys enjoyed this video of the live play review. If you have questions about this video or anything regarding that content, make sure you write them in the forum. I'll be more than happy to answer that. So other than that, I'm going to wish you guys luck.